So hey guys, and welcome to the second episode of my Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind Talkthrough, where we venture across Vvardenfell and we nostalgiasm all over it because it's wonderful. So you may have noticed that the texture quality in this video isn't as good as it was in the previous one, but it runs at 60 frames per second, and that's because I bumped the game down to medium, which made it run much better, and I don't think I've dipped below 60 frames per second at any point during the entire recording session, which is fantastic. The video may actually look better than the previous one because on YouTube, videos that run at 60 frames per second are allowed to have a much higher bitrate than videos that don't. So it may actually look better than the previous one. But anyway, today we're starting off in Vivec City because I had some optional objectives from the daily quest to go and talk to some NPCs, so I did that and they gave me a little bit more information about each quest. And as I was making my way to them, I also found this lovely lady over here, which after talking to her told me that she's a mushroom supplier for a Telvanni mage in Sadrith Mora, and she's late on her delivery, and she doesn't really want to go there on her own because she's worried about what the mage will do to her because she's late. So she's like, you know what? If you bring him these mushrooms, you can keep the payment. I am too worried about him doing something to me, so if you bring him the mushrooms, keep the payment, okay? And also, as I was faffing around Vivec, I came across this view where you can see two different stages of the ziggurats being built, and it's awesome to see how much detail they put into it. You can kind of see the different layers with, you know, kind of the sewers and stuff like that. It's just kind of neat, I don't know. Oh yeah, and the mushroom supplier lady told me I should take a boat into Sadrith Mora, which makes sense because it's really far away from here. And I also stopped by the Siltstrider Tower hoping for the why walk when you can ride line. But instead, I got triggered by this bimbo right here.
If I had to deal with one more ignorant noir from...
If I have to deal with one more ignorant noir. That's not how you pronounce that, woman. It's Inwa. You Inwa. Just, you're lucky I have the prevent attacking of innocence turned on. But anyway, I took the boat to Sadrith Mora, which is one of the more alien-looking places because it generally just has more mushrooms than trees. And as you can see in front of you, it's centered around a massive Telvanni tower, which, as far as I know, come in two different varieties. The first one is where the mushroom is grown around an already existing tower, which are generally bigger with more branches than the other version, which is just the mushroom on its own, which, unsurprisingly, is much smaller. And they're grown by Telvanni wizards using very powerful magic. And these Telvanni wizards are the most egotistical, pompous, and rude idiots you can ever imagine. And let's just say they're just not very nice because they believe that wisdom confers power and power confers a right. So if they are more powerful than another race, they believe they have the right to do whatever they want with them. Which is why you will see a ton of Argonian and Khajiit slaves all over the place. Because, well, they're more powerful than those two races, so they believe they can do whatever they want with them, so they run slave markets, and all of their mines and farms are ran by these slaves. Also, if this tower was not made to be accessible by everyone, because this is a video game, you would have to learn how to levitate in order to access the upper portions of the tower, and that was a deliberate choice by the Telvanni wizards. They just didn't want to talk to people who can't even know how to levitate. They're just tits. I mean, listen to this guy.
Rhino finally came through, did she? And she sent you in her place, no doubt because she believes I will turn her into a Vardvak. Or such nonsense. The things these commoners believe.
Now, I'm not one for stealing, you know. I usually play good characters, but when it comes to the Telvanni, well, let's just say few things may go missing here and there. Or, more likely, everything that isn't nailed to the ground. So after nicking absolutely everything that wasn't nailed down, I decided to do a little lap around Sadrith Mora because I seem to remember a couple of Daedric ruins scattered around here and there, and I love exploring Daedric ruins. And before you know it, ta-ta, there it is. There's just something so weird and cool looking about these Daedric ruins. The architecture is just weird. I know I've been saying weird a lot, but that's what Vvardenfell is. It's just weird. It often comes so close to looking normal, but then you turn around and ba-dung, there's a giant mushroom right in the middle of a road. Now, I wasn't able to find an entrance into this ruin, so it was probably just an overland one, but what I did find were a couple of hungers, which are very disgusting looking Daedra that serve Boethia. They have very long limbs, they usually have a tail, and a very wide mouth with a long tongue, and these don't look anything like the hungers I remember. These look more sort of insectoid-ish. They look kind of more akin to the Quama, whereas the original hungers that we got in Morrowind, this is what they looked like by the way, looked far more humanoid. They had humanoid ribs, They generally just kind of look like scamps that were stretched out far too much. These ones, not so much. They don't even have a tail, and as I've said already, they kind of look more like an insect than something humanoid. But even though they don't look like the original hungers, they still look pretty damn cool. And they still spew poison all over the place, so, you know. And here I finally managed to kill it, and I was like, that doesn't look like a hunger at all. And he dropped another piece of the warrior's poet armor. This time it was the helmet. And at first I thought it was kind of like the mini-boss of the area, because I also found a heavy sack right after him. But a few seconds later I found another hunger, so I was like, yeah, I just got lucky and he managed to drop it. Because I think all the mobs around Vvardenfell have a chance to drop a piece for one of these sets. The chance is small, but, you know, if you kill as many mobs as I did today, it's probably going to happen. Also, being grappled by the hunger's tongue while you're in first person looks like the most violent French kiss I have ever seen. It is mildly disturbing, to say the least. Now, as I was making my way around the different islands around Sadrith Mora, I've noticed this thing right here. And yes, that is indeed a Telvanni tower that's marked with a player house icon. So you can get a Telvanni tower as your player house. I don't know how you get this house, because it just says this house is not currently for sale, but there ought to be some way for you to get this. So yes, you can get a Telvanni tower as a player house. Now the house itself is absolutely huge. The garden goes around the entire Telvanni tower, and it even goes down to the water where you have a little dock kind of thing. The ground floor of the tower is pretty damn big, and you also have a couple of smaller rooms on the side, and the top floor is actually pretty small. I was kind of surprised at how small the top floor was. But you know, you can make this your bedroom and just have everything else on the ground floor or in the garden. Now, as I was going farther away from Sadrith Mora, I stumbled into another Daedric ruin that was unfortunately locked, so I assume there is some kind of a quest you have to do to get in, but I didn't really look around too much because I also saw another Telvanni tower and an ancestral tomb nearby. Now, the Telvanni tower turned out to be the Halls of Fabrication trial, so that's pretty neat, a trial inside a Telvanni tower, and the ancestral tomb had a quest in it, and I thought, you know, since I didn't really take you into an ancestral tomb in the first episode because I was like, yeah, it's spot on, and that I didn't even show footage of it, I thought I might as well do the quest with you. The quest was pretty good. There's this Dunmer adventurer who is very brave indeed, and he's like, there's so much treasure in here, but unfortunately there's a big monster right there, and he just kind of points towards a massive spider shadow, but if you go there you see it's a very tiny spider numbing on a scamp. So you go through the tomb with him, which is filled with kind of like urns and coffers, and yes, I did loot every single one of these. You kill a big bat, and that's kind of this part of the quest done, because he then moves into another ancestral tomb after realizing this is not the one he was looking for, which is on the other side of Vvardenfell. And just as I killed this dude, my internet died, but you know, at least we can look around the ancestral tomb a little bit so you can see the architecture and why I said it was spot on, because it really looks like what I would imagine the ancestral tombs from Morrowind would look like if they were made today. Just the architecture in general and the markings on the walls is just really neat. After I logged back in, I went back to Mournhold and I cleaned up my inventory because it was completely full. And I know it'd probably be a lot better if I picked up specific items rather than absolutely everything, but I don't know, I just can't help it, I'm a hoarder. Then, as I was making my way back to where I was before, I started mining resources and, you know, picking everything up. And I got Viridian Dust, which I already got before, but I didn't really check what it was for. But turns out it's for the new glass armor. So yes, you can get the proper glass armor style in the game, which is awesome. Now, as I was exploring around and going farther away from Sadrith Mora, I realized I'm getting close to one of the daily quests that I picked up in Vivec, so I decided I'm gonna do that. However, I got immediately distracted by this monastery right here, which was unfortunately inaccessible, but you know, it was cool to see it nonetheless. Now, this is the part of Vvardenfell that I'm actually not very familiar with because I didn't spend an awful lot of time around here when I was playing Morrowind. So the only things that kind of pop into my mind when I think of the east coast of Vvardenfell are Sadrith Mora, obviously, and the Daedric ruins surrounding Sadrith Mora. Then I remember a Dwemer tower that had 2 skeletons in it on a bed. And then I also remember there being a lot of vampires scattered around the ancestor tombs over here. And this is actually where I first caught vampirism in Morrowind. And if you played Morrowind, you know that vampirism was no joke. It was actually pretty bad. And I somehow managed to figure out how to cure vampirism without having access to the internet, because I played Morrowind before I had internet, or without understanding the game, because I was playing the English version of Morrowind and this was before I learned to speak English. and it was a right pain in the backside to say the least. So yeah, I'm not very familiar with this part of Vvardenfell, and I feel far more comfortable talking about any of the other locations instead. But anyway, I was trying to make my way over to the Quama mine because first of all, I always liked exploring Quama mines in Morrowind, and I was also kind of curious what I'm gonna get from the daily quest. And I picked up another quest right before the Quama mine, and it turned out to be just a... well, I'm not going to say a standard delve because it took me about 20 minutes to complete, but it was just a delve. So it had the quest, a sky shard, and a boss. But it was a bit bigger than most of the delves you find in the regular game, where you usually just go down a corridor, there's a small offshoot for the sky shard, then you kill the boss and you have a convenient exit open up to the entrance. It was also packed full of mobs, you know, mostly Quama, warriors and workers like that, and there were a ton of people running through here, so the mobs respawned at an insane rate, and I think I killed like 200 mobs before I finished both the quests. But I'm happy to say that this is indeed a Quama mine. It looks like a Quama mine in Vvardenfell, and I'm very happy about that. And once I finished the delve, which once again took about 20 minutes, I got a pair of shoulder pads from the lady in front of the mine, and then since I was a little bit short on time, I teleported over to Vivec rather than running back to Sadrith Mora and taking a boat back, because I was really curious to see what kind of reward I'm gonna get from the daily quest. And one thing I kind of forgot to mention in the beginning is that this ziggurat had gorgeous ceiling. I mean, look at that. And here's the lady. So I finished the quest and I got a goodie bag called Hall of Justice Explorer's Dispensation. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but once I opened that, and there we go, I got an armor piece called the War Maiden's Hat. It was light armor, it added spell crit, then maximum magicka, spell damage, and finally more spell damage to magicka damage ability, so that's kinda neat. And that's where my journey ended that day, so I posed in front of the gorgeous looking ceiling, and I was like, this is a great place for an outro. So, as always, I thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.